All right. So, welcome to the Friday evening talk. I think that Christmas is on Sunday this year, right? So, we're coming right up to it within the next few hours or so. Um, and so, I'm really surprised to see so many of you here today. And we've been enjoying the moment for a while, and then it stumbled across the idea that, everyone is racist. It's part of our nature. It has to do with instinct. In fact, the the instinct would be the territorial instinct that you see that in many animals. That in fact, one example that's very interesting is that they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone, and that they put radio collars on quite a few of them and started to track. And what they found out was is that these wolves collected themselves into tribes, and that they had natural boundaries or natural borders between the tribalism, and it only took them one generation to set that stuff up.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was kind of amazing. But that's how deeply territorial we are. That in fact the territory, that instinct, is very close to to the issue of what we would call ownership or control. The instinct of this is mine, I
Sure.
own this. Okay, so
And
this is my place. Go ahead,
and
David.
that's rooted in survival, though, ultimately, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
Most of
That's
what's
Go ahead.
fascinating, like most of the things we condemn as shadow, fundamentally are disassociated instinctual intelligence, fundamentally. And
Hmm.
it's like we believe we have to castrate these things. There's a great quote by Jung, actually, that says, I would rather be whole than be good. And I think fundamentally that means that goodness, as he's kind of responding to Nietzsche, is a phenomena based on cultural identity, and it changes all the time. Whole, integrated whole, is the Dharmakaya. It is the way of being. It is the wholeness. It is Gautama under the tree, unifying neither towards nor away any further, like total unification. And like
Hmm.
it's not to condemn tribalism, it's to incorporate tribalism into a larger sense of tribe, right? You don't remove an instinct, you don't remove
Exactly. You
sexuality.
expand the borders.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, that's Jung as well. You
yeah.
greater yourself. You do not limit. You do not come in. You get greater. You get larger. Hold the darkness as well that than just staying in the little light, right?
You're talking very good
Absolutely.
drama, David.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's good. Right. Okay.
Love it.
So that means then that the self preservation instinct is the basic instinct,
Yes.
and that the other instincts follow along in support of that. Now, one of the things that we get messed up with in our culture is the procreation instinct because we immediately go to sex. But in fact, that's just one of the many kinds of procreation that we do. We make things, we have concepts and ideas, and that the mind is the forerunner to all things. The example that I use is that the first car was an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Gautama says from all things proceed from mind, from the mind all things proceed or come, right? One of the
Exactly.
Dhammapada. All yeah, and that's where ideology and philosophy. Our time is a war of philosophy. It's a war of meaning, first within our own relationship to reality, fundamentally, right?
Hmm.
And
Well,
Gautama, 2,500 or 2,650 years ago. I mean, the same thing.
exactly. So there are four basic instincts. The procreation instinct is number two. Number one, the big deal is um, self preservation. Now, I would say that that could be better stated as organism preservation instinct that is trying to keep the organism alive. And the basic communication of that is fear. That if we did not have fear, we would have been dead long ago. We would have walked into the principal's office and hit him, or we would have done something really stupid. We would have walked into the road. We would have jumped off a cliff. We would have done anything like that if we were completely fearless. And yet, fear winds up being the number one problem that we have in the world, and we manipulate each other through propaganda to make people afraid.
Yes.
But in
But it's
fact,
not
that
the
was
fear that's the problem. It's not libido that's the problem. It's not violence that's the problem. It's the disuse or misuse of these qualities, right? It's
exactly.
the neglected child of our own souls that then screams back at us and says, you know, where am I? Where are you? Right? And then we become afraid of fear. We come, you know, if you go into some communities, there's afraid of aggression. Become so pacified that if you were to go into the wild, you'd be dead in a day, right? I mean, and that cannot be the way of being. That cannot be the highest dharma.
And we can see some of it even in superficial conversations. If you look at psychiatric students, something like this, perhaps they'll tell each other, "Oh, your aggression is so well sublimated."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In your like basically you push it all into this weird like Freudian.
Instead of integration, they look to chop, like you're saying, and we can chop and chop and chop and chop, and it can be helpful along the way. But just like we saw with what you were saying about violence, when they reintroduced those wolves in Yellowstone, one of the things that they noticed is that the shores of the waters that ran through there started to hold together better. And this is because wolves, they didn't sublimate aggression. Instead, they took proper action to do their jobs as part of the system that they were integrated within again. When they were taken out, they would eat too much from the shores. And these soils would become loose. It wouldn't be able to hold. And yet when the wolves were reintroduced, they did their thing, and those little geoengineers, those little beautiful bastards, they went about eating what they needed to eat and doing what they needed to do to help, you know, Mother Earth. And we thought in what we were doing, we thought by killing them all, bam, 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 that we were doing something that was helpful for us, which for a time it was. But this is one of the ways in which we see that we all interbe.
Yes. Yes.
Everything comes
the river regained its original shape. It actually changed course, right? And so then it's almost, you know, as the Christian, the Bible would say, what is without, so too within. And like you can then see that even the qualities of being, the ultimate dharmakaya of reality, require the violence to sustain the river herself. I mean, fuck, that is like,
if that doesn't blow you out, I don't know what would.
I mean, I was in a retreat once, and I was, you know, doing a lot of meditation, and there was this moment where I began to be like, oh my God, the Dharma is quite literally speaking from every single angle if you just perceive it the right way. And it was all, I mean, it felt psychedelic to the point where this cascade of meaning is falling off of a single blade of grass or a snake moving through, as Thich Nhat Hanh beautifully, well, I'm not going to quote him, but the point being is like, you can look at everything and see that interbeing, that dependent origination, and that fundamental, even archetypal aspect of all qualities moving through the fabric of this existence. I mean, the wolves, that's one of the most eloquent examples of the need to reintegrate the disassociated qualities of mind. That is like, if you can't see that, if Nietzsche didn't kind of prove his point in that one moment, like,
how beautiful. Thank you so much, David. That was so beautiful to share with you. Thank you.
Well, man. Yeah. I'm glad I answered the phone. This is cool.
Yes. Excellent. And this is what I want to see promoted too, is this sort of Sangha of people getting together and understanding that you're not alone in the world, that and so there's something very interesting, not just something. This whole topic of instincts is extraordinarily powerful because it describes human behavior, but all animals, especially mammals, but not just mammals, ducks and geese and fish and everything has these four instincts. Okay. And so we've talked about two of them just a bit. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about the procreation instinct as materialism, wanting to own and control things. That the example that I use is once way, way back when this guy was getting the marrow out of the bone of some big carcass that the wolves had finished. couldn't get it. And he picked up a rock. And this particular rock had a kind of an edge to it, so it made the bones break easy. Well, otters use stones. They will go and get a clam at the bottom and a stone, and then they'll go to the surface and swim on their back, and then use that stone to break open the clam. But what does the otter always do with the stone after he gets the thing open? He just drops it. So what made us human is the fact that someplace along the line, somebody picked up a rock and he thought it was a nice rock. It did the job, and he kept it.
Cool.
Maybe a generation or so later, somebody wrapped twine and a stick around it, and now we've got the first hand axe.
And that's it.
And we use those things for protection and for tools. That in fact, there's very little distinction between a tool and a weapon, because we use them for the same thing. We use it for making our life better and for self-protection. That in fact, that original stone that we're talking about is now the modern day cell phone.
Yeah.
It used to be a gun. Before that, it was a dagger or a knife or a sword, and very few people went around without being armed. That in fact, the Sikhs, part of their religion is you've got to have a particular kind of dagger with you.
I saw the other day a small snippet in a cartoon that I like to watch sometimes, and I swear, I never know where they get these things from, but it sure does come back around. It said something along the lines of, it's really great that we do all these things, but as soon as a being is able to extract enough sugar from something using a machine to give itself diabetes, it needs to start looking beyond conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a very interesting idea with what Dhammarato was talking about with the weapons and such too, because for a long time that was needed in order to get to where we are. Yes. But even back
that's because it was a widespread belief. Yeah, if everybody had the belief this is a safe place and we can get along together, then there would have been no need for the knives. It was the fact that it was mass hysteria that other people are dangerous.
But just like the wolves, because also similarly, like within mammalian, and well, I mean, not even just mammalian, there are violent conflicts and rights of land, and so that instinct transcends into consciousness itself.
Yeah.
Right.
And we see people talk about this when they talk about the development of the human throughout evolutionary psychology, when they use the term self-domestication.
Yes.
I used to be like a tiger as a young boy, and I think someone else said something about it. Now I'm a house cat.
Mm-hmm.
And wait, say that again. I missed what you just said.
I said I used to be like a tiger when I was younger, and now I am much more like a house cat, and I much prefer to be more like a house cat.
We are animals that can no longer, for the most of us, walk barefoot upon the earth. I had a moment. It was one of the most religious moments of my life. I was riding a motor. I was in this. Okay,
Don't ride a motorcycle barefoot.
I was riding.
Other than that,
I crossed this mountain peak, a pass in on the Tibetan Plateau, actually. And right as I crested, this pack of 4 wolves walked over at the same time. And I kid you not, we were less than 20 feet from each other. And they looked at my eyes. I could see the color. Well, they were blackish, but I could see like straight into their fucking pupils. And this animal had been so hardened and perfected by its environment. There was no coddling. There was no pug in it at all. All of that was a nightmare to the dogs that came from them 10,000 years before. And these beings were as close to something holy as I had ever seen. And they moved on. They looked at me, and I wasn't afraid. They didn't give any territorial kind of stances. But they never broke a single stride. And they just looked kind of like amused almost, and just kept walking or kind of trotting up this mountain that must have reached at its peak like 19,000 feet. And they're just going up, and there's these little farming villages where yak and knack will graze, and they'll hunt them. They'll take down these animals. And just seeing this being in like 0 Celsius on a mountaintop, walking higher up without ever slowing down, no hint of exhaustion, And I'm looking at it, and it was like everything that had been tamed in me, realized had been a slight small sin to a degree. I had given up something. I had forgotten something. Not that we should be
Your
warring
connection
and
to nature.
yeah,
Mhm.
like
You gotta
we're
remember
kind of
your connection to nature. Yeah, like I think a lot of times you can see enlightenment in a lot of animals and even babies because they haven't like developed the critical thinking interpretation mechanisms to um, separate themselves out from reality as an individual entity.
sure.
So they're like constantly, it, they don't really have the ability to mentally proliferate.
Yeah.
So like, um, which makes them enlightened to an extent, but like humans are kind of different because a human has the ability to mentally proliferate and discern reality and discern the nature of reality itself and the rules by which it operates, but they also have the capacity to return to the no mind of not mentally proliferating about any of it and just being it. Like this is it.
It's
Like
such a unique
like
position
you're
to be
saying
in.
about with the Dhammakaya before. If you
You
think there's any difference between spiritual and physical, meditation and not meditation, you're still in an illusion because all of it is the Dhamma. There's
Yeah.
nothing else.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you,
there's
You
Scott.
know, there have been there's a several times in history. One would be Tarzan. Romulus and Remus are two other examples of where human beings were not raised by human beings, they were raised by animals. And they became much more natural.
Return to monkey. Yeah.
I, I,
Well, yeah, this human baby was born an ape and stayed an ape. It didn't get socialized.
well, I just want to add, I'm not saying that like to return there. Okay, there's a great quote by Herman Hesse that goes something like, "It is not back to the child nor back to the wolf. It is deeper still, further yet into the sin. It is deeper back into the human complexity that we then find God." And I'm not trying to say that we should go back to the
Actually,
wolf.
it's not that
Oh,
deep.
what?
It's not that deep.
Well, no, I was just gonna say.
It's more about like lightening up.
No, but
Like
what
the
I was
deeper
gonna say,
you're
what I was gonna
going,
say
the
was
more
simply,
confusing it's getting.
I was just gonna say, I'm not saying that the wolf was enlightened. I was saying that its complete perfection of the environment had led it,
Mhm.
had coddled it in no way, so it was hardened. But in Buddhist philosophy, it is only through the human life that one can actually enlighten. And so it's like it's not the kind of born into non-dualism. It's the return back, right? It's
So,
that
Exactly so. So what
really
you're
what you're
actually
saying,
saying,
yet
yeah,
I hear Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about it. He says, when you're a young child and your mama has you cradled and the little dog comes over and she kicks at the dog, this
mhm,
is the moment. This is the first hindrance.
right, exactly
And
so.
then the
Then it,
child walks around and stubs his toe and says, ah, and kicks the chair, thinking the chair is separate and can have a self, you know? And then this goes
mhm,
on forever and ever and ever and ever until one day we either hit our head hard enough and something physically changes and we go, oh, fuck, this is it? Or
that's
we sit long enough and we go, oh, this is it. And I like the second one better, you know, because then I don't have to have a rod in my head.
all right. We can sum
lump in the
up
head.
then. We
But
can
were you
sum up
gonna
what
say
we're saying
Dhammarato?
here. Go. Sorry.
No, go for it,
First
Dhammarato.
truth
Okay.
of the
We
Buddha.
we can
Suffer.
we can
Yeah.
we can sum this up then by saying that humans, as well as all the other animals, have a whole lot of equipment we are born with, that programming of instincts. And that
Originally,
what human society has done is warp our instincts, layering them, using them, misusing them. And the example that I would use is the nesting instinct or the herding instinct because that keeps us safe. If we have a nest to sleep in, but then there are nest rules, there are house rules. And our society has so misused that one that we wind up, every one of us, doing what we're told to do without enjoying it. We just go along to get along because we're social. that nesting instinct is that social system that we have, and we just go ahead and just do what we're told to do, and then we resent it.
Mm-hmm.
And
The
then
harshest
we do it
punishment is
sometimes or do it poorly.
Isolation.
And so one of the most important qualities of the Dhamma then is to understand that the Buddha had these things too. These four basic instincts they've got analogies to them, and one of them is the four modes of clinging. Now, originally, people will think that all that means that the instincts are bad. No, it's that we cling in four ways according to the misuse of these instincts. And one of them is that humans go around being afraid of things that there is no fear inherently in. But it once did, so we remember it from the past and we're socialized into seeing things as dangerous, to where in fact they're not. Another thing that humans do with the territorial instinct is we start using concepts and ideas and belief systems and things like that as our territory.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, Scott.
I was going to ask a question about the underlying tendency for craving for being, and then the one
Isn't
after
that look at that. The Buddha knew that the underlying tendency, the instinct of craving for being, the self-preservation instinct. I mean, listen to that. The Buddha knew about this stuff scientifically 2,500 years ago. Go ahead, Scott.
So I wanted to say that, like, yeah, like once you realize the let go of the or change or transcend or whatever you want to call it, the underlying tendency for craving for being, which is essentially is the animal instinct to the fear of death at the end of it. It's just the fear of this body dying. And then so like that's why the Buddha always took people to the charnel grounds and showed them dead corpses and said, hey, look at those. This body will be like that too. So once you let go of the craving for being, the craving for birth, the craving for being somebody, like a person, being alive, then that leads to the realization of non-being, or the or the nirodha.
Being nor
And
non-being.
then once you experience that, it's so profoundly good that you crave for that too. So the next underlying tendency is the craving for non-being. Because so a Buddha goes the middle way. He doesn't crave to not exist, or he doesn't crave to exist either. So it's like he's like escaped the cycle of it all, the cycle of birth and death. That's what that means by the wheel of samsara. It's like coming into existence and coming out of it. Once you let go of both of that, you see the divine in the mundane, or the emptiness in the form, and the form out of the emptiness. Like it's all the Dhammakaya. Like it's the one reality.
Okay, let's expand upon that, Scott. Wherever we are, if we want to leave that place and go someplace else, there's both a death and a birth involved with that. We are dying to the place that we are in when we leave it, and when we go someplace else, then that's a new birth. And so we go through that life-death cycle that is the big deal at the bottom of the instincts. Actually, we play that out with every time that we move around. We play that out, okay? And you can see, in fact, there's an old Jimmy Durante song that the Coneheads did when they were about to go back to their original planet, okay? Have you ever had the feeling that you wanted to go, and you wanted to stay, go, stay, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, I go, I stay. Now that's really, really profound. I mean, it's a silly little song, but when we recognize that, we recognize that we do sometimes have bad feelings over, am I leaving? Am I going? I mean, this is all about the rituals of goodbyes and hellos.
Yeah.
And we have those rituals. In fact, it happens from time to time when somebody's cell phone cuts off and they're gone from the talk. And then they
Yeah.
have bad feelings because he didn't go through the goodbye ritual.
Mm-hmm.
That they were, killed instantly and necessarily by a dead battery. uh, and so
Love
we
that.
can actually see then that the four modes of clinging that the Buddha was talking about were rediscovered by science in the form of these instincts, and that they called them underlying tendencies. And these are the four modes of clinging, that if we cling in that way, we wind up in one of those woeful states, like hell. And the one that we use the most is that woeful animal. We're all born as an animal. And what do we mean in that? It doesn't mean a worm or an insect or a snake or whatever. We're talking about the animals that were draft animals, elephants and horses and domesticated animals. Why? Because we humans use an animal to do what we want to do with unconcern for the horse. So I've got two examples. One, I saw this in India, a donkey that was tied on his back to a pole that had a grinding wheel on it, and this donkey was around this path, and the owner was putting the sugar cane in and making sugar cane juice and selling it out on the street. Guess how much of that sugar cane juice that donkey got?
Yeah, yeah.
Not much. He might have gotten the husk, and that might have been enough, but
Him, it might have been. He might have just been playing his position, huh?
yeah, he might have been. But the donkey didn't look too happy to me when I was there with him. Here's another example, that the horse is in the pasture with all kinds of pastoral foods to eat, and the pasture and the horse are bought by a new guy, and he puts a harness and a plow on that horse and makes the horse plow up his own pasture.
That is an
Just
amazing symbol. Wow. Dhammarato. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty
okay.
magnificent. Yeah.
Yes, so that's what we do in our lives. We are taught to do what we're told to do. You got to go get a job. You got to go do this. You got to go do that. We've got obligations, and all of that comes out of that being a dumb animal. And then, but humans are smart enough to recognize, wait a minute, I'm doing something and I don't like to do it. But then we make the mistake is I don't like to do it because he made me do it. My boss made me do this. Okay. Now, we resent our job. Most work that's done in the world is make do work, unnecessary work. An example of that is all they would have to do is change the tax laws in the United States, and every accountant in the country is out of business. About half the courts get cleaned out. I
Same with
mean,
med.
we actually make stuff to do that is completely unnecessary to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Scott.
Oh, I just wanted to give a testimonial of
Hmm.
before I started practicing meditation as taught by Dhammarato. I used to have like a problem with authority. Like I would either be
Who
afraid
doesn't?
of them or really angry and resentful towards authority. So no matter who it is telling me what to do or a boss, I would either be scared of getting their approval or I would like hate them on the inside. So I'd be like suffering on the inside. And then it wasn't until I realized like the 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 joy of the Dhamma and like the power in it. Like there's something powerful in it. When I started to realize like the transcendent peace and love that came only from within and right in between my two ears, that destroyed all fear of authority. Now I just see them as my friends and I
Yeah, they're
treat them
just
like my
friends.
friends.
Yes, that whole
So yeah,
that's
they're my friends.
Thank
the
you so much,
reality
Scott.
is that every human being is a human being. Period. That's all we have to do. But our society teaches, oh, this one's big, this one's little, this one's rich, this one's poor, this one's bad, this one's good, and we bring in all of these judgments about people that we're better than or less than, which is a comparison or a competition. We make our whole lives a competition for no reason at all. We don't have to compete with each other. Or if we do, we can do it in a win win situation to where everybody wins. But no,
Everybody,
yeah, but we have a culture that's set up about winning and losing. Now, I can understand instinctually where that comes from because in the old days, the winners had dinner and the losers were lunch.
yes, sir.
But we
Mm.
don't live in that kind of society anymore. That we used to live in a jungle and it was dangerous. Now we have cities, but we call them concrete jungles because everybody there is still afraid.
And you know what's funny about that? When they have to be grouped in such a way, we hear phrases come out of those areas that are so beautiful, like "we all we got."
Mm-hmm.
Or it
When
is
I
what it.
it is what it is. That's another great one. Oh, it's amazing. You
That's
know,
so. Yeah.
that phrase, when I see that phrase pop up, I love to see it because I recognize it as a quick reminder from whatever bodhisattva dropped it there for me to just take a nice breath.
I was gonna ask you, Dhammarato, can you talk about Sama San? Because we're talking about competition and winners and losers. But
Mm-hmm.
another thing that I started training my mind to do is be a winner. So like that's what you teach about Sama Sankappa, if I understand
Mm-hmm.
that correctly. So it's like being a winner in your own mind is like number one thing to do. Because like from being a winner, you're going to be more compassionate to others because you're not competing with them. So it's like, let's say,
Right.
oh, your girlfriend, so yeah. So let's say, oh, your girlfriend cheats on you, uh, leaves you. Like you can, in your mind, think of yourself as a loser, or you can think, oh, well, she just filtered herself out of my life for me, and I, I need wholesome friends around me. So it's a blessing in disguise. So like you think about it in a way that makes you a winner, and then you feel like a winner, like,
Okay.
and
Ab-
that's so.
All right. Let's look at two things then,
Yeah.
or two different ways. Let's look at it from the ordinary position versus the noble position.
Okay.
Now, in a relationship, in an ordinary position, the winner is the one who leaves, who quits, and the loser is the one who lost something that they wanted. And
Right.
so, in that regard, part of the, tending to or going towards the noble, it's better to quit a job than to get fired.
Right.
It's better to leave on your own rather than getting kicked out of whatever it is, because that
Yeah.
it really hurts our social our nesting instinct. We don't like to
Yeah.
get kicked out of the nest because it's
Exactly.
dangerous. Okay,
Yeah.
but the reality is many relationships are more dangerous than getting out of them, but we don't
That's
use
true.
the wisdom for that.
True. Yeah.
Now let's look at it from the perspective of the noble. And the noble that you were mentioning, Scott, is that we through Anapanasati and getting our own internal success going, that will give us that attitude about how to deal with the rest of the people. That in fact we deal with other people the way that we deal with ourselves on our own insert anyway. So if we're cranky and controlling and critical of ourselves, then we'll be exactly that way to others on the outside.
Right.
And so we actually do need to do that noble training on the inside first through Anapanasati, is to really get our own mind together. In the 1960s or 70s, they had the expression, you got to get your shit together, man. Right? And then the joke is yeah, I got all my shit together and now I can't move it. It's so heavy. But the idea of the unification of mind, which basically means we make friends with our own internal system, which means we wisely deal with these instincts. We're not trying to get rid of them because they keep us alive. If we didn't have any instincts, our wisdom wouldn't be sufficient. But what we do with Anapanasati practice is by developing the wisdom, we let the wisdom now guide the instincts. An example of that would be fear. If you know that you would feel fear if you go into that particular bar, then don't go into that particular bar. Let's use our wisdom. Let's not charge in there and then wind up in danger. And so but children, we can't teach them that, but we can adults. So we give children rules. And now we all grow up as adults using rules as a substitute for our own wisdom. And so what we need to do then is to start looking at what's going on and figuring out what's going on so that we'll know how to deal with things wisely. We can see how things are tending, see how things are going that way. So this is part of that, getting your mojo together, getting your Sama Sankappa. Everybody here has probably had enough mathematics to know about an equation with an equal sign. They're common. And then a little bit later in that, then you learn about greater than, equal, less than, greater than or equal, less than or equal. Okay. And then a little further in to math, you learn about equivalencies, which take into consider errors. But what we're going to do here is we're going to change that sign, because most of them, we go around greater than or less than. That's what our culture operates on. I'm greater than you or I'm less than you. And we can only make friends with those that we think are equal. But we can change that equation sign into a heart shape. That's the way to go, is to stop comparing ourselves to others and treat them as friends. The Dhamma is all about friendship. But the first place that it comes in is within our own minds, which means that we learn to control these instincts, make them our, let us say, our allies or our companions, rather than our masters, because mostly we are driven by our instincts ignorantly. And now it's time to wake up. And how we do that waking up is by this thought that comes to mind, sitting there silently, and this thought comes up. What am I going to do with it? Well, in Anapanasati, we're going to examine that thought. Is this thought worth having or not? Because often we're thinking of thoughts that are repetitive, going over and over again. Every time we have the thought, we feel bad. We feel like we've got work to do. We feel uptight and upset. And all we have to do is change those thoughts in the moment. I can see that thought and I can make a change to it. So if we can do that over and over and over and over again, we become successful at being able to control what kind of thoughts that we're going to have. That's an amazing quality, to be able to know that you can, in fact, control the thoughts that you're having. You've learned to control your breathing. You've learned to control your thoughts. Guess what? The next item on the list is what Scott was talking about. That's Sama Sankappa, which is get our feelings in line with our thoughts and our body. We get the body relaxed. We get the mind wholesome. And we do this over and over again. And then we actually, instead of just knowing that we're comfortable and safe and secure in our posture, we can actually feel safe and secure. We can get down to that point that right now the self-preservation instinct can become a lapdog. He does not have to be a barking match dog. So we learn to control these feelings by, the reality is getting ourselves in a real safe, secure, comfortable environment, and then capitalize on that reality so that we actually think about being safe, secure, comfortable, relaxed, secure, and satisfied. that right now what I'm doing is okay. And so we do that over and over again, and pretty soon we add that additional point about success. Success. That's where the winner starts to build in. I can do this. I can control my mind. I can throw out all of those woulds and shoulds and coulds and all of that kind of stuff and just be comfortable right here, right now. And so, go ahead, Alex.
I wanted to share two things. Also say thank you to both of you, of course. Let me figure out how to make the technology hand go away. Okay. One, there's something I had been reading in the Dhamma as of recently, and it really intrigued me because what it talked about is something Dhammarato has talked about often, which is we don't know what is or is not present in another's mind in a direct way. Right? So we must observe behavior over a long time. And Dhammarato has talked to me about arahatship in the past, and I've learned a great deal from it and looked into it myself to understand better. For even an arahat, nibbana is not annihilation. Nibbana is a cooling off. Nibbana is realizing
not
things,
caring anymore. You just don't care about anything. Everything is all right. I can handle anything.
We still have sankhara. We still have mental formation take place upon, sense contact. But the difference is we don't have samphasa. We don't have strong contact in such a way that a strong mental formation arises. This is an arahat. Is they still have it. It still comes, but they understand it'll also still go. And they've been doing it long enough that this is a very nice response that they have programmed.
Yes, Scott.
Another way to point out arhats is they have no quarrels with anyone. So they're not quarreling with anyone in the world. So like they don't have conflicts with other people because they
because they don't care.
That stuff. They're too busy having time.
Now here's something that's kind of interesting. That I'm seeing something play out that I knew a long time ago and watched it play out then. And that is the arahat does not make a good Dhamma teacher because he doesn't care whether you get the Dhamma or not. And that the examples of that would be that the arahat will just sit there for a long time and let people just go on and on and on and on. And then he'll do a one-liner. He'll do a zinger. And that's the only Dhamma you'll ever get out of him is a zinger. But the better teachers are those that in fact there's a kind of a standard, and the standards, there's several of them. One is that in order to be a teacher of the Dhamma, one should have the fruit of the Dhamma, the fruit of the sotapan, the joy, the enthusiasm, because that stuff really rubs off. So that's the best kind of teacher to have, is one who is really enthusiastic about you becoming enthusiastic about the Dhamma. The next level down would be the path of sotapan, not actually the fruit, but he's far enough along that he can impart correct Dhamma. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has a standard that's a little bit lower than that, and that is that even though he's not sotapan yet, he at least understands paticca samuppada, that's really the bottom line. That if someone does not understand how the mind works, then he should not be teaching Dhamma, and yet you'll find that in the West a lot, that people teach the Dhamma just because they like it. They think they can make some money off of it, but that they really don't quite understand how the mind works. Yes, Scott, go ahead.
Another thing about teaching that brought something up for me in my mind is I heard a past spiritual teacher say this, and it seems pretty true for I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems pretty true for most authentically awakened people who are quote unquote teaching. It's less of a trying to teach someone else as it is like a bird sitting on its branch singing its song just for the sake of singing its song. Like it's just the beauty of doing it and the enjoyment of actually doing it. It's not like it's not for the motive of what's going to happen, or if they're going to get it or not, or if it's going to work. It's because in the teaching, when they're giving the teaching, they're telling you their current experience. So they're just singing a song. Like they're just it's so much fun to do. It's so much fun to talk about. Like
you probably heard me talk about that. Yes, that because people say, well, why do you teach so much? And thank you and all of that kind of stuff. And my answer to that is that I'm doing this because I like it. This is fun. Sharing the Dhamma and watching you guys share the Dhamma and grow with each other, that's just the best part.
It was one of the reasons I came back over and over, Dhammarato, is you said, I don't do this because of duty to Dhamma. I don't do this because that, the other thing. I do this because I get a kick out of it.
Kick out of it, right. This is enjoyable. Just like that bird sitting on that, singing his song.
Yeah, that's why I do the Wednesday calls.
Yes, you enjoy doing it. Exactly.
Actually, yeah, and since starting doing those calls, that my practice is also like accelerated. Like it like increased it, because like the best way to learn something is to teach it. Like I think Einstein said that something is like, if you can't teach it to like a fifth grader, you don't really understand it. Like you have to be able to
teach
you have to be able to speak the
teach it.
There is actually.
Oh, sorry. I'll just I thought real quick. That's another thing about the Buddha, is that he spoke the language of the person he was teaching to. So the Dhamma was explained in like different ways depending upon the person. And probably one of my favorite stories was a not so intelligent guy he's not going to understand all of the links of dependent origination and all the jhanas and stuff.
He couldn't even learn the chanting. So yes, I know.
Yeah. So he gave him a rock and a cloth, and he said, rub this rock, and as you purify the rock, you purify your mind. So it's like incredibly simple, but also there's so much detail and like there's so much nuance to it. Like there's so much. I feel like I'm learning something every time. Like I'm reading another sutta. Like there's always like, something else to learn. Like,
and especially if you contemplate it afterwards, it can be almost immediate. You know, you take it in, you let it soak and suffuse, and come back and read it again. And you go, how'd I miss that?
Right.
So there's a sutta that talks about this. It says, in fact, that there is 5 ways to learn the Dhamma. One is to listen to the teacher. Number 2 is to share it with your other friends. Number 3 is to mull it over. Number 4 is to recite, like with the sutras, read them over and over again, or recite it, because that puts us in the mind state. And then the 5th item on that list is the big one. And it's well known within the Sangha, and that is that we have to put ourselves in the position of teaching the Dhamma, especially if we're around people who are discerning and know something about the Dhamma, and so we want to make sure that we're teaching it correctly. You see, when we're just thinking about the Dhamma, we can think about most anything, but when you go out there to teach, you want to make sure that what you're teaching is correct. So my on practice has greatly improved over the fact that I've been teaching, and I'm really proud of you, Scott, for doing that. Your Dhamma will really grow because of that, as well as just taking that time to voice it and to speak it. So this is part of the practice, is to share the Dhamma with others, that everybody can be a teacher if they understand what they're teaching. And the best way to understand what we're teaching is by teaching it. And so, in fact, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and Achan Po had me teaching before I was ordained.
Wow.
And that's a great thing, because in Thailand there's a tradition that only monks can teach the Dhamma. But that's not the case at all. Even in the time of the Buddha, there were lay people who were very famous teachers. There's in fact one. Go ahead.
I went to a Thai Wat recently, and the abbot there, he wasn't fluent in English, but we're talking about the Dhamma because it's not really in the language. So like I understood the Dhamma, but he didn't understand English. So he was like, "Oh, yeah, please come teach the Dhamma in English," because the only Dhamma talks they give are in Thai, and he was completely happy. He was completely encouraging of me to come and teach it in English.
Me too.
Yeah. And
Yes.
Dhammarato is such a sign because it's hard to find the real Dhamma, the noble Dhamma in English. So it's like really lucky to find Dhammarato on here teaching on the internet. A thing I wanted to say is like once you do find a good teacher, like I approached the interaction with the teacher the same way. Like I was pretty good at sports. Like I went Division I in college. But when I had a good coach, like I listened to what he told me and I did it. And I didn't just argue with him. And I didn't say, "Oh, but that's not going to work," or "That's not the right way to do it." I listened to what the wisdom, the good coach was telling me, because he's been around the block a couple times. So he's been doing this a lot longer than you have. So you can take the wisdom from the old guys, and if you apply it diligently, now you're like, "Oh, now I see why he was saying that. Like now I know experientially that it works." So that was the transition. Like,
All right, guys. Thank you so much. It was great meeting you guys tonight.
Thank
We
you.
hope to see you again.
Yes. Before you go,
Yeah.
I think that in fact this is probably a pretty good time to finish this. So does DJ, do you have anything to add to this conversation that we've had tonight? We've covered
Anything?
instincts and mojo and all kinds of stuff.
Just come on back to that mojo, baby, and chill.
I love it.
David, Matt, how do you go? What do you have any thoughts about it before we leave?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought you mentioned that this talk was going to be on racism at the beginning.
Well, it has been, hasn't it? If you think about it, all of this territorial instinct and all of this one better than that, and we wind up being in competition. We're racist for everybody. That's what the competition is all about.
yeah.
Is to come out of that territorial instinctual thing that things are dangerous. So thanks for remembering that so that we can tie that back together.
Thank you.
Another thing is the mental concept that anything that this is me, mine, or I is racist.
It's racist.
So that's what it is. Like making a continuous self that isn't there, and saying, and giving it privileged over the others. That's what racism is, just on a bigger scale. So like it's the same thing of getting rid of it's like a form of clinging, saying this is mine, this is me, this is I, this is my country, this is my land, my people, or even my body, or even my thoughts. My body, my thoughts, my feelings, my intentions, my spaces, my sides, everything. None of it is me, myself. So that's liberating.
Right. So basically, racism is nothing but the fact that we think that we belong to the human race. And all we need to do is stop the race. We're not racing. We're not in competition. Those other people out there, they can win too. We don't have to be that competitive. That's what's really is at the bottom line is that we're already okay. We've already run whatever races that we were in. And now it's time to sit and relax and enjoy the fact that we're winners. That we can't control our own mind. So thanks for bringing that up. Yes, we are all racist. And yet look at how they do it. One political party accuses the other one of being racist, and we're all racist. So stop racing.
I love it. Thank you, Sangha.
All right,
Thank you
guys.
so much, guys.
Take care.
We'll see you all later. See you, David. See you soon.
See you, Dhammarato. Take care. Nice meeting you, Alex. Take care, guys.
Thanks for coming, Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Have
pleasure.
a wonderful Christmas time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Boy.
Happy holidays. Every day's a holiday.
Amen.
Every day's a holiday, actually. Yeah. Always
Let me
cause for
remember.
celebration.
Guys,
All right, bye.
Bye.
All right, stay. Bye, Dhammarato.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Scott. Bye-bye, DJ.